In the past, individuals who were looking for enlightenment and those who were looking for something that went beyond the commonplace had always been drawn to Sedona, Arizona, which is known for its breathtaking red rock formations and its lively spiritual energy. The Star Seekers built their commune at this location, which was tucked away amid the vortices and energy fields. They were a peaceful community, and their ideas revolved upon the coming arrival of extraterrestrial beings who were kind and would lead humanity to a higher state of existence. They welcomed people from outside the community, and their message of love and peace for all people resonated with individuals who were looking for refuge and a connection to some higher power. I was one of those people who pursued. For as long as I can remember, I've been fascinated by the wonders of the world and the prospect of life existing beyond Earth. It was the ideology of the Star Seekers that struck a chord with me. Their assurance that they would find redemption among the stars provided me with a feeling of optimism and purpose in a world that sometimes seemed to be chaotic and devoid of significance. In an effort to be ready for the advent of our heavenly saviors, I joined their commune with the intention of completely embracing their teachings. The community was a refuge of peace and quiet, tucked away amid the red cliffs, and it was a picture-perfect place. The days were spent with meditation, chanting, and the study of old literature that discussed heavenly creatures and cosmic alignments. We had a humble existence, and our days were all occupied with these activities. She was a charming lady called Serafina, and she was the leader of the Star Seekers. She led us with a kind hand, and her words were filled with knowledge and compassion. During her speech, she mentioned the Great Harvest, which was a period of time when those who had been selected would travel to the stars, leaving the domain of Earth behind in order to reach a higher level of existence. Everything seemed to be in perfect order at first. There was a feeling of belonging to myself, as well as a connection to something that was bigger than myself. On the other hand, as the weeks stretched into months, a nagging sense of dread started to take hold. Over time, Serafina's teachings evolved into more esoteric concepts, with a greater emphasis on cleansing and sacrifice. The chants took on a more ominous quality, and the meditations became more powerful, almost to the point of becoming hypnotic. Having been a sanctuary of tranquility in the past, the community started to feel claustrophobic. The outsiders who had been coming to the commune stopped coming because they had developed a feeling of dread, which had replaced their original interest. In the neighboring town of Sedona, rumors started to spread, murmurs saying that odd rituals and disappearances were taking place. I made an effort to reject them as meaningless misconceptions that were the result of ignorance and fear. However, the murmurs continued, which became more louder and more forceful. After then, the evening of the Ascension ceremony fell upon us. We were collected in the middle courtyard by Serafina, whose eyes glowed with an intensity that was not even somewhat natural. She discussed the imminent advent of our heavenly saviors and the need of making the ultimate sacrifice in order to demonstrate that we are worthy of their salvation. In an effort to become one with the stars, she issued a call for volunteers, defined as those who were prepared to give themselves as receptacles for the holy energy. When a number of people from the commune came up, their expressions were filled with a calm dedication, and their eyes were filled with a mesmerizing zeal. They were directed to the middle of the courtyard, where a massive platform in the shape of a circle had been built just for them. When Serafina lifted her hands and began chanting in a language that I was unable to comprehend, her voice reverberated off of the red rocks. There was a throbbing, unearthly light that emanated from the platform as it started to glow. Then, I was able to see it, the truth, which is both terrifying and indisputable. The light became more intense, enveloping the volunteers. Their bodies began to dissolve into shimmering particles, and their cries were absorbed by the brightness that seemed to come from another universe. It was not as if they were climbing to the heavens. They were being eaten, their vital energy being absorbed by the platform, and their essence being given as a sacrifice to something. Fear seized me completely. That the Star Seekers were not a calm spiritual organization was something that I came to the realization with a frightening certainty. The ideas that they held were distorted, the rituals that they followed were warped, and the promise that they made of redemption was a deception. They were not making preparations for the coming of extraterrestrial beings who were in goodwill. At the same time, they were calling out something other, something dark and something ravenous. My pulse was racing in my chest as I turned and fled, and the cries of those who had been sacrificed were reverberating in my ears. I made my escape from the commune, the red cliffs that were now towering menacingly in the moonlight, their beauty marred by the tragedy that I had seen. I made my way back to Sedona, my head in a state of disarray and my faith completely numb. There was no evidence discovered by the authorities during their investigation of the commune. Without a trace, the Star Seekers had disappeared, the platform had been removed, and the courtyard had been left vacant. They disregarded the stories, the murmurs, and the disappearances, declaring that they were the result of mass hysteria and the illusions of a cult that was misdirected. But I am aware of the reality. I saw the act of sacrifice. I was able to see the light. I am aware that the Star Seekers discovered their redemption in the depths of the night sky. This, however, was not the redemption that had been promised to them. It was something that was far more ominous and terrible than anything else. I am left with the unsettling understanding that sometimes the pursuit of enlightenment may lead to the darkest parts of the human heart. This is something that I am left with as a survivor of their perverted beliefs. Story 2. A region of ancient ruins and traditions that were passed down from generation to generation. Chaco Canyon had a force that reverberated deep inside the spirit. As an archaeologist, I was fascinated by the secrets of the past and the tales that were carved into stone and bone throughout history. I had devoted a significant amount of time and energy to researching the Anasazi, an ancient Pueblo tribe who had constructed their beautiful cities in this distant region of New Mexico, only to leave them many centuries ago. Their absence remained a mystery, a conundrum that kept me absolutely enthralled for a number of years. I was under the impression that the solutions were concealed inside the canyon walls, among the broken-down remnants of their vanished civilization. The things that I discovered were so much older and more foreign than I could have ever thought they would be. An excavation was being conducted by my colleagues and I on a recently found kiva, which is a circular ceremonial chamber that the Anasazi people utilized for religious rites. During the process of meticulously removing the layers of dust and dirt, we came upon something quite remarkable. The thing was enormous and resembled obsidian. It was completely round and pulsated with a faint light coming from inside. Although its surface was clean and polished, we did not know what material it was made of. It was unlike anything we had ever seen before. Without a certain, it was not of Anasazi descendancy. It was of a different kind. In spite of our joy, we were beginning to feel a rising feeling of worry as we took the relic back to our study laboratory. It seemed as if the item was emitting a certain energy, a faint hum that reverberated throughout the laboratory, causing our apparatus to malfunction and producing unusual oscillations in the power system. When we examined the item in further detail, we found that it had detailed engravings on its surface. These carvings were symbols that did not match any language that was known to us. Yet they appeared to have a profound and fundamental significance. After then, the dreams began to appear. The study team had vivid dreams that they all shared together. We saw odd, ghostly entities, as well as galaxies that were spinning and exotic landscapes. It was as if we were tapping into a communal memory, a past that had been lost, and the dreams were disconcerting, but at the same time, they were oddly familiar. We came to the conclusion that the item was, rather than just a thing, it was a key, a portal to something that was more than we could well comprehend. Once upon a time, the item became active. As the mild hum became more intense, the light inside the body became brighter and began to pulse with an energy that was unearthly. The symbols that were on its surface started to glow, and they projected holographic pictures into the laboratory. These images were filled with whirling patterns of light and sound that seemed to twist the very fabric of reality. At that moment, we were witnesses to something that was both spectacular and scary. We came to the conclusion that the item was more than simply a remnant of a vanished civilization. It was a signal, a calling card, sent by creatures from another planet, beings who had been to Earth long before the Anasazi, long before mankind began. It was a beacon. Our newfound knowledge led us to realize that the Anasazi had not just vanished, they had been taken away. Having been selected by these heavenly creatures, their culture has been incorporated into a cosmic tapestry that is beyond our comprehension. The holographic images became more intense, eventually coming together to create a single, consistent shape. This person is tall and slim, with skin that is a dazzling silver color, eyes that are huge and black, and no pupils in them. The same figure that had been a recurring presence in our nightmares was the identical figure that was represented in the petroglyphs of the Anasazi people. It was in the real world, not through words, but by pictures, ideas, and feelings. The figure communicated its message, a message of cosmic oneness, of a higher level of life, and of an imminent ascension was sent by it. One might say that it was an invitation or a call to join them, to transcend the confines of terrestrial existence and to become one with the universe. A few members of the study team, whose brains were blown away by the power of the artifact, enthusiastically accepted the message, their eyes becoming glazed over with a mesmerizing zeal. As they got closer to the artifact, their bodies began to dissolve into shimmering particles, and their essence was absorbed into the radiance that emanated from another realm. As a result of their response to the call, they had given up their worldly lives in favor of a celestial destiny. With my head spinning with the ramifications of what I was seeing, I stared in terror as the scenes unfolded before me. The item was not a gift from a good person, rather it was a trap, a siren song that led people who sought knowledge to their own destruction. When I turned around and raced away from the laboratory, the throbbing light of the artifact and the cries of the ascended was still booming behind me. When I left Chaco Canyon, I took the item, the ruins, and the secrets of the past with me. I went back to the realm of the living, having been irrevocably altered by the events that I had observed. Despite being in the canyon, the artifact continues to wait and cry out. As a survivor of its awakening, I am left with the unsettling understanding that there are certain doors that are better kept shut, and there are some truths that are best revealed without being found. The cosmos is enormous, and inside its an unlimited number of depths are marvels and horrors that are beyond the grasp of human beings. Additionally, there are occasions when the search of knowledge might result in a state of darkness from which there is no way out. Story 3. The lack of sound was the first indication that something seemed to be amiss. The city of Santa Fe, which is often filled with the sounds of music, laughing, and the soft murmur of conversation, was engulfed in a thick and unnatural quiet. With a throbbing headache and a huge blank in my memory, I awoke with a pounding headache. The last thing I recalled was eating dinner with several friends at the Shed, which is a well-known restaurant located in the middle of the city at the time. At that moment, I was laying on my bed, all dressed, with my shoes still on, and I had a distinct taste of metal in my mouth. The clock caught my attention. It was 7 o'clock in the morning. It was a whole night that I had wasted. I felt a knot of dread tightening in my gut, and I saw that panic was beginning to rise in my chest. Despite my best efforts, my mind was a blank slate, an emptiness where memories ought to have been. I struggled to recollect the events that had occurred the previous evening. Not only did I phone my buddies, but they were just as perplexed as I was. They recalled the supper, the laughing, and the tales that they passed around. After then, there was nothing. We were all suffering from a collective amnesia, and there was a void in the place where the night should have once been. Over the course of the day, an increasing number of individuals reported having the same experience. A break of memory that affected the whole city, a collective mental blackout. At the same time, the local news stations were buzzing with conjecture, with speculations ranging from a mass panic to an experiment conducted by the government that went awry. But nobody had any solutions to provide. Our memories were taken from us, and our experiences were obliterated. We were a city of the forgotten as well. After then, the rumors began to circulate. Fragmented tales of weird lights in the sky, dark beings moving through the streets, and a low, humming sound that vibrated throughout the city. These testimonies were scattered around the city. These mutterings, which were at first disregarded as the ramblings of those who were sleep-deprived and bewildered, started to come together to form a story that was quite unsettling. There was something that had occurred that evening, something that we were unable to recall, something that had been purposefully removed from our memories. I began my investigation because I felt the need to recapture my lost memories and to have an understanding of what had occurred during the hours of the night that I had not been able to recall. During my conversations with other people who had also experienced the memory gap, I compared notes, looked for common threads, and looked for any indication that may help me solve the enigma. Through our common experience of forgetfulness and our commitment to learn the truth, we came together to establish a support group, a collective of those who had forgotten to remember. We began to discover evidence which consisted of little and disquieting particulars that pointed to something unusual. There had been tales of strange animal behavior, patterns of light burns on buildings, and strange symbols that had been chalked on the sidewalks. Despite the fact that the evidence was often circumstantial, it pointed to something that was beyond our comprehension, something that was Daiian. As we continued to explore deeper, the memories that we had retrieved started to come to the surface. These memories were not distinct recalls, rather they were fragmented pictures, brief feelings and flashes of horror. We saw glimpses of brilliant lights, tall, skinny bodies, and exams being carried out on tables made of cold metal. These recollections were terrifying dreams that were broken up into fragments, and they reinforced our greatest fears. A kidnapping had taken place. The more we was able to recall, the more horrifying it really became. Our bodies were probed and studied, and our thoughts were controlled. We saw ourselves being taken through a series of procedures. We were able to get glimpses of other species, not just the towering grey individuals, but other creatures of all sizes and shapes. A zoo of different kinds of supernatural living forms. A more extensive experiment, a cosmic investigation of the physiology and mind of humans, included us as participants. Not only were the memories that were retrieved upsetting, but they were also potentially harmful. The shards of extraterrestrial encounters caused several members of our party to lose their sanity, and as a result, they went insane. Their brains were unable to deal with the horror we were experiencing. Other people vanished, and it is not known what happened to them. It is possible that the entities who had taken our memories regained them. Despite the fact that the truth was becoming more and more likely to engulf me, I persisted in my inquiry because I was motivated by an intense need to comprehend and uncover the truth. The memory wipe was not a random occurrence, rather, it was a purposeful act, a cover-up on a cosmic scale, and I was aware of this realization. Regardless of who they were, the extraterrestrials did not want humans to remember them. They desired that we disregard it. We would not, however, forget it. We would struggle to retrieve our memories that had been erased and to disclose the truth, regardless of the repercussions. Even if we were the ones who were forgotten, We would not be silent. We were going to remember, and we would certain that they would not forget us. Story 4. A sanctuary of fun, learning, and childlike delight, the Little Rascals Daycare was located in Austin, Texas, on a street that was flanked with trees and was characterized by its tranquility. Because I was the director, I was a woman who was committed to giving the children in my care with an atmosphere that was both secure and caring. The pure happiness that the children brought into my life on a daily basis gave me a feeling of purpose and satisfaction, and I cherished my work. After that, the sketches got underway. At first, these were nothing more than usual scribbles made by children. They were a kaleidoscopic riot of color and creativity. As time went on, however, a troubling trend started to become apparent. The youngsters began sketching the same thing one after the other, without any prior coordination between them. The bodies of these tall, spindly beings were stretched and deformed, and the limbs ended in pointed, claw-like claws. Their eyes were huge and dark. All of the depictions of the characters were always set against a background consisting of a single, enormous crescent moon and swirling clouds of a purple color. An attempt was made by me to dismiss it as a communal imagination, a collective dream that was started by a novel or a movie. In spite of this, the designs were consistent, and the figures were eerily identical to one another, which was frightening. When questioned, the youngsters provided descriptions of the figures that were hazy and fragmentary. They referred to them as the Whisperers, or the ones from the sky. Dreams, visits during nap time, and whispers in the dark were some of the things that they discussed. An increasing sense of anxiety pervaded the childcare facility. The youngsters experienced a withdrawal, their laughing being replaced by a tense quiet, and their joyous energy being replaced by a listless indifference to the situation. Because of their terror, their eyes were wide open and their bodies were shaking. They refused to take a sleep. They stated that the voices became more audible as the darkness increased. The children's frightening drawings and more erratic conduct prompted me to begin my investigation, during which I looked for a reasonable understanding of the situation. After speaking with their parents, they rejected it as childish dreams, claiming that it was the result of their children's hyperactive imaginations. I sought the advice of child psychologists, but they could not provide any responses that could be considered definitive. Their diagnoses ranged from collective anxiety to shared hallucinations. After that, I found the way to the basement, a neglected area under the daycare, the existence of which I was unaware, with its entry concealed. Behind a dusty storage shelf to conceal its entrance, there was a weird metallic odor in the air that was thick and heavy in the basement, which was chilly and heavy. There were towering, spindly beings peering back at me with their wide, dark eyes, and the walls were covered with the same symbols that the children had been creating before. Not only that, but I discovered it in the middle of the basement. Within the fundamental fabric of existence, there is a vacuum that is a round area of blackness. It pulsated with a light that seemed to come from another universe, and its edges were rippling and moving, as if they were a doorway to another realm. Although their words were incomprehensible, they were infused with a chilling malice. The murmurs came from the emptiness, and they were a chorus of voices that were warped. Then, with a horrifying surety, I came to the realization that the pictures that the youngsters had created were not imaginations. It was a time in the past. Recollections of anything that is real, things that are awful. The Whisperers were not imaginary companions. Rather, they were extraterrestrial creatures that were reaching out from another dimension. Their influence gradually made its way into the brains of the youngsters, and their whispers tainted their purity. I attempted to bridge the gap between our world and theirs by shutting the gateway and securing the connection. It was, however, too late. The Whisperers had already gained a foothold in our world, and their power and influence were rising at an alarming rate. Youngsters served as their conduits, and the pure minds of youngsters served as a portal to our world. While I was guiding the children to safety, their little hands were holding mine, and their eyes were wide with panic. I evacuated the childcare establishment. After leaving the little rascals' daycare, which had been a haven of learning and joy, I found myself in a location that allowed me to enter the vacuum. Where did the daycare go? What happened to the basement? And what happened to the portal? I have no idea. I am only aware of the fact that the whisperers are still there in the world, their voices reverberating in the shadows, their influence growing, and their presence serving as a terrifying reminder of the unseen horrors that lie just beyond the curtain of reality. In addition, the children, who were the innocent witnesses to the unfathomable, will eternally bear the weight of their memories, with the whispers from the emptiness permanently seared into their brains. Story 5. The rumors had been going about for years, whispering in the shadowy corners of the internet, stories of a crashed UFO that was buried deep below the Nevada desert, with its secrets being guarded by the careful eyes of the United States government. People who believe in UFOs and conspiracy theories are drawn to Area 51 because it is a site that is steeped in myth and folklore. I was one of those people who was pulled to the mystery and the idea of exploring the possibilities of discovering the truth about life on other planets. The stories, the murmurs, and the hazy images of odd, unearthly craft were compelling enough for me to believe them. It was clear to me that there was something that was concealed from the general population, with its mysteries concealed under the sands of the Nevada desert. Moreover, I was resolute in my pursuit of it. There was a motley band of UFO hunters, each of whom was motivated by their own fixation, their own belief in the presence of alien life. I joined a group of people who had my mentality, a group of people who were interested in UFOs. Our excursion was methodically prepared, and we did so by analyzing maps, satellite photographs, and testimonies from witnesses who had seen weird phenomena in the region around Area 51. We were aware of the dangers, including the strongly guarded perimeter, the possibility of being arrested, or perhaps worse. On the other hand, the ability to resist the allure of the unknown and the potential of discovering the truth was insufficient. With our pulses hammering with a combination of excitement and anxiety, we broke through the barrier when it was still dark outside. At the same time as our spotlights were cutting through the darkness and our eyes were searching the horizon for any indication of the crashed plane, we maneuvered the perilous terrain of the desert. After that, we were able to locate it. A debris field, strewn over the desert floor, a cemetery of twisted metal and broken glass. Rather than the complete spaceship that we had imagined it to be, had been the result of our imaginations. The debris was unlike anything I had ever seen before. Its composition was unknown, its design was foreign, and its mere presence was a demonstration of something that is beyond our comprehension. There was a subtle metallic odor that hung heavily in the air, and the air crackled with an energy that was not natural. There was also a quiet hum that traveled through the earth. We approached with caution, our flashlights lighting the debris field, which revealed pieces of weird gear, wiring, and circuits that were unlike anything that could be seen on Earth. Then we were able to see them. It is the mementos. Small items made of metal were dispersed across the debris. Their surfaces were polished and flawless, and their forms were strange and alien for their appearance. Despite the fact that their entire existence radiated an unnatural energy, they pulsed with a subtle light that emanated from inside. The surreal beauty of these creatures, together with the promise of undiscovered power, captivated us. We went through the process of collecting them, and our pockets were stuffed with these strange treasures. Our heads were racing with the excitement of discovery. At the time of our departure from the disaster site, our hearts were pounding, our brains were flooded with visions of the debris, and we were holding the mementos securely in our hands. Proven proof of alien, Life and concrete evidence of a cosmic encounter had been discovered by us. We had found what we had been seeking for. On the other hand, our victory was fleeting. While we were driving away from Area 51, the trinket started to have an effect on us. A creeping suspicion that crept around the group like a virus, a slight alteration in our perspective, and an increasing sensation of dread were all signs that something was wrong. Our friendship was destroyed, and our shared interest was eventually replaced by mistrust and distrust. We began to argue with one another. Our realization was that the mementos were more than simply trinkets. They had aliveness. They twisted our ideas, warped our perceptions, and turned us against one another in order to exert a malicious impact on our brains, so turning us against each other. The dreams started, and they were vivid nightmares of strange settings, of hideous experiments, and of our bodies being probed and manipulated by beings that we could not clearly see. The mementos were not presents, rather, they were curses, relics from this hellish place. As a result of the souvenir's impact, each individual member of our group eventually gave in to it. Their conduct got more unpredictable and aggressive, and they became more and more reclusive and self-conscious. Some of them vanished, and it is not known what happened to them. It is possible that the forces that had brought the vessel down regained them. Others met with horrible ends, their lives being eaten by the evil that had seeped from the relics. Both of these events occurred. I was the only person who had survived our unfortunate journey, and I was the final one to leave. I tossed away the mementos and buried them deep in the sand of the desert in the hopes of severing the link and evading their poisonous influence. However, the harm had already been done. The nightmares, the voices in the dark, the chilling memory of the crash site, and the keepsakes from hell are all experiences that continue to occur. As a result of the understanding of what is concealed underneath the sands of the Nevada desert, I will be eternally altered and forever tormented by the experience. As for me, I am well aware of the fact that there are some realities that should be kept undisturbed, and there are certain mysteries that should be left unexplained. The cosmos is enormous, and inside its an unlimited number of depths are marvels and horrors that are beyond the grasp of human beings. Additionally, there are occasions when the quest of the unknown might result in a state of darkness from which there is no way out. Story 6. My evenings have always been filled with bright, surreal landscapes, and my mind has always been a canvas for the weird and the beautiful. I have always been a dreamer through and through. Because I am an artist, my dreams serve as my inspiration. The ethereal vision that they contain spills over into the canvas, where it transforms into vivid, otherworldly masterpieces. As of late, however, my dreams have taken a more sinister turn, their splendor being tainted by a chilling feeling of dread, their beautiful vistas being replaced by cold, sterile environs, and their ethereal imagery being replaced by ugly alien creatures. My being is being kidnapped. Subtly, it began with a reoccurring vision of a whirling vortex of light, a sensation of weightlessness, and a feeling of being watched. I put it out of my mind as nothing more than another dream, a manifestation of my hyperactive imagination. However, the dream repeated again, becoming more vivid, more detailed, and more horrifying as it progressed. My body was numb and my mind was disconnected as I floated into the vortex. I was lured towards a vessel that was waiting for me, a sleek silver disc that was hovering quietly in the night sky. The true trauma started after they were inside the ship. My body was restrained to a chilly table made of metal, and I was illuminated by a strong white light. The people that surrounding me were tall and slim, with skin that was a light gray that was nearly transparent, and eyes that were huge and dark because they lacked pupils. They moved with an elegance that was unsettling, their limbs bending at angles that were not natural, and their long, delicate fingers probing my flesh inserting needles and taking samples. Excruciating agony, a scorching, burning feeling that appeared to rip through my very existence, was the suffering that I was experiencing. I awoke screaming, my whole body soaked in perspiration, and the memories of the kidnapping were etched into my brain like a permanent tattoo. I made an effort to dismiss it as nothing more than a nightmare, but the terror continued to linger, and a chilly knot of dread tightened in my gut. I began painting the dream, which included the whirling vortex, the extraterrestrial vessel, the towering individuals with grey hair, and the frosty table with metallic surfaces. The act of painting, which included transforming the dream into a shape that could be touched and felt, served as a means of processing the terror and winning back control. However, the dreams persisted, and each one revealed further information, adding new levels of detail to the very distressing story of my kidnapping. I was able to see the inside of the vessel, which was a complex network of hallways and rooms that were packed with odd technology that was throbbing. I saw other entities, not only the towering grey forms, but creatures of all shapes and sizes, some humanoid, some insectoid, and others so odd that they beyond description. I saw them all. They were all participants in the experiment, and they were the subjects of some mysterious extraterrestrial plan. Not only did the drawings get more bright and precise with each dream, but they also got more unsettling. It was no longer the case that they were just interpretations of my dreams. Rather, they were becoming interprophetic. It was as if the paintings were a doorway into the future, a foreshadowing of the horrors that were to come, and details from my nightmares would show in the paintings before I ever experienced them. When I first began recording the dreams, I made sure to catch every single detail, every single picture, and every single experience. I looked for any indication that may explain what was going on with me by comparing the dream logs to the paintings. I was looking for patterns, linkages, and any other clue that could enlighten me. It was then that I became aware of something awful. It was not enough for the paintings to just foretell my kidnappings, they were also having an effect on them. As I continued to paint, the appearance of the kidnappings grew more tangible and regular. It seemed as if the act of creating, of giving shape to the dream, was somehow increasing the link between myself and the aliens who were kidnapping me. Not only were the paintings a mirror of my visions, but they also served as a conduit, also known as a dream catcher, that was attracting the extraterrestrial beings to me. To break free from the vicious cycle of creative production and abduction, I made an effort to cease painting. I wanted to cut off the link, but I was unable to. There was an overwhelming want to paint, and the dreams were too vivid to be ignored. My life was becoming a canvas for the extraterrestrial creatures who were using me as their muse, and I was imprisoned, locked in a feedback cycle of dreams and paintings. Following then, the paintings proceeded, each one providing a horrific insight into my future kidnappings and a diary of the atrocities that were to follow. Experiments, genetic manipulations, hybrid creatures, and a disturbing notion of an extraterrestrial agenda that was beyond human understanding were all presented in these images. I was no longer only an artist, rather, I had become a chronicler and a witness to the impossibly extraordinary. I was also aware, with a terrible certainty, that my kidnappings would continue, that the nightmares would never end, and that the paintings would eternally be a witness to the awful reality of my meetings with extraterrestrial beings. I am the dream catcher, and the nightmares that I experience are those of those who have been kidnapped. Furthermore, the art, specifically the art that I make, is the frightening proof of a reality that the world is not yet prepared to acknowledge. Story 7. Dr. Elias Thorne is my name, and I worked as a researcher at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Media Lab, where I investigated the interaction of sound, technology, and human perception. The potential of music to impact not just our thoughts and feelings, but also our bodily condition. was something that I found very fascinating. When I was younger, I was under the impression that sound was more than simply vibrations in the air. Rather, it was a basic energy, a language that echoed deep throughout our own being. A voyage into the unknown, a plunge into a symphony of lunacy, and a route of discovery were all paths that I took as a result of my research projects. An extremely low-frequency ELF wave is a region of the electromagnetic spectrum that has been mostly unexplored. I was working on building a new form of antenna, which is a device that is capable of receiving such waves and interpreting them. I was under the impression that these ELF waves were the key to unlocking new modes of communication, as well as new ways of comprehending the cosmos. I had a mistake. For some reason, my antenna picked up a signal one evening when I was working late in the laboratory. A faint, pulsating frequency that was very different from anything else I had ever experienced before. It did not originate from the Earth, nor did it have any recognized sort of radiation from the heavens. It was otherworldly. I made an effort to separate the signal, examine its structure, and figure out what it meant. I was unsuccessful. However, the frequency did not respond to my efforts because its structure was convoluted and disorganized, and its meaning was evasive and unpleasant. During the time that I was listening to the frequency, I started to experience a peculiar sensation that was accompanied with a developing sense of dread and a feeling of disquiet. Despite the fact that the night was already warm, the temperature in the laboratory began to drop, and the air became more dense. When I tasted something metallic, my mouth was full with it, and the hairs on my arms stood on edge. After then, the discomfort began. My brain felt as if it were being pounded by needles that were not visible to me. The agony was intense and scorching, and it reverberated deep inside my skull. The anguish became more intense, and it extended throughout my whole body, causing my muscles to twist and my limbs to distort. My guttural scream of anguish reverberated throughout the empty laboratory as I let out a scream. I made an effort to turn off the antenna in order to cut off the connection to this sneaky frequency transmission. My hands, however, refused to comply. They had a heavy, leaden sensation, as if they were being dominated by an invisible power. The frequency increased, the agony became more acute, and the world around me began to dissolve into a whirling maelstrom of colors and distorted noises. My sanity was disintegrating beneath the assault of this extraterrestrial frequency, and I was on the verge of losing my mind. I had sights and horrible hallucinations of landscapes from another world, of hideous animals, and of experiments that were carried out on corpses that were writhing and screaming. It was impossible for me to differentiate between the visions and the actual world, since they were so vivid and intense. After then, the frequency stopped abruptly, just as abruptly as it had started. The agony began to lessen, the images disappeared, and the world began to come back into focus immediately. The encounter left me laying on the floor of the laboratory, bathed in perspiration, my body shaking, and my head whirling from the events that had transpired. I was able to hear the frequency, which was a psychotic symphony that was written by an extraterrestrial intellect. It was not a message intended for human ears, rather, it was a weapon, a sonic attack that was designed to destroy our sanity and to break our brains. A peak of a cosmic horror that was beyond the grasp of humans had been shown to me when I had stumbled onto a frequency from hell. A testimony to the perils of the unknown, the antenna's twisted metal was a witness to the fact that I destroyed it. My study was halted, and my career was in shambles when I left the laboratory. As I fled into the realm of stillness, the recollection of the frequency was permanently seared into my consciousness. It was a terrible reminder of the unseen horrors that lie just beyond the curtain of reality. Despite the fact that it is quiet, the frequency continues to reverberate in my nightmares. It serves as a continual reminder of the precarious nature of my sanity and the thin line that between reason and insanity. My life will never be the same. and I will always be plagued by the symphony of insanity that I unknowingly sent into the world. And I am aware, with a frightening certainty, that there are some frequencies that should be avoided at all costs, and that there are certain doors that should be avoided at all costs. The cosmos is enormous, and inside its an unlimited number of depths are marvels and horrors that are beyond the grasp of human beings. Additionally, there are occasions when the search of knowledge might result in a state of darkness from which there is no way out. Story 8. There was a secret that was even more horrifying than the atomic bomb that was kept at Oak Ridge, Tennessee, a community that was steeped in the history of the Manhattan Project. It was not a weapon of mass devastation, rather, it was a weapon of subtle infiltration, a stealthy invasion that altered the entire fabric of the town, transforming its inhabitants into hosts for an alien colony. It began in a less obvious manner, with symptoms similar to those of the flu, a general malaise that swept over the town like a summer cold. Those who were affected reported experiencing a peculiar itching sensation under their skin, as well as weariness and headaches. In the face of the symptoms, the local medical professionals were perplexed and disregarded it as a seasonal virus, a harmless bug that would eventually run its course. That was not the case. All of the symptoms became more severe, with the itching being intolerable and the exhaustion becoming incapacitating. People began growing weird lesions on their skin, which were little welts that were round in shape and pulsed with a faint light from inside of them. As the welts got bigger and spread throughout their bodies, their skin became transparent, exposing the horrible reality that lay under the surface. The larvae. Small larvae that are squirming and pulsing with an unearthly radiance are found snuggled under the skin of the host, feasting on the life energy of the host person. Over the course of their fast development, the larvae underwent a transformation in their bodies, becoming more insectoid in appearance and becoming more coordinated in their motions. To put it another way, they were not only parasites, rather, they were pupae that were getting ready to emerge and turn the town into a breeding ground for an alien society. The transition was sudden, violent, and irrevocable all at the same time. The citizens of Oak Ridge, one by one, were overcome by the infestation, which caused their bodies to be twisted and molded, and their brains to be taken over by an intelligence from another solar system. Their humanity was replaced by a hive mind, and their single job was to maintain the spread of the alien race. They were transformed into drones, and their individuality was eradicated. Touch, whether it be a reassuring hug, a reassuring handshake, or even just a mere brush against an infected person, was the means by which the virus was transmitted. Due to the fact that the National Guard had walled off the town's boundaries, the community was placed under a quarantine zone, and its citizens were stuck inside a living nightmare. As an epidemiologist for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, I was sent to Oak Ridge to examine the epidemic. The terror, the hideous mutations, the loss of humanity, and the frightening efficiency of the alien hive mind were all things that I personally went through and observed. Attempting to discover a cure, a method to put an end to the infestation, and a way to rescue the citizens who were still uninfected were my goals. It was, however, too late. The hive had already established itself, and its power and influence were rising at an exponential rate. The drones, whose bodies had been completely altered into monstrous representations of insects, started building the hive, which was a gigantic organic structure that pulsed with a terrible light that seemed to come from another universe. As a result of the quick growth of the hive, which consumed houses, trees, and even the ground itself, the town was transformed into a horrific monument bearing witness to the alien invasion. The drones' bodies were linked, and their brains were united into a single collective consciousness. I was taken captive and carried to the center of the hive, which was a throbbing room packed with thousands of drones. It was brought to my attention that the queen was a monstrous and ugly monster, with its body consisting of a throbbing mass of flesh and chitin, and its eyes shining with a malignant intellect. I was able to speak with the Queen not via words, but rather through various pictures, ideas, and feelings. It revealed to me their reality, which was a planet in a state of decline, destroyed by conflict and pollution. Their desperation, their hunt for a new home, and their search for a new breeding area were all obvious to me. And it revealed to me their motive for selecting Oak Ridge as the location for their hive, so that they might change the people who lived there into hosts for their colony. The only chance they had for survival was in us, and we were their rescue. The next generation of the hive mind was going to be carried by me, and I was going to be the next host. As I prepared myself for the inevitable transition, the loss of my humanity and the embrace of the hive, I closed my eyes and prepared myself well. However, it never appears. Outside of the quarantine zone, a group of scientists had been working feverishly to create a sonic weapon. This weapon was a frequency that disturbed the consciousness of the hive, which in turn broke the link between the Queen and her drones. After the central control of the hive was broken, the hive started to collapse, and its biological structure began to dissolve into a foul and sticky fluid. The drones' brains, which had been liberated from the influence of the hive mind, disintegrated, and their bodies reverted back to their human forms. Their recollections of the infection were fractured and fragmentary. My life was saved, and I was brought back to the land of the living. The events that I had observed had a profound impact on me. A quarantine was placed on Oak Ridge, its people were transferred, and the existence of the town was removed from official records. The hive had been destroyed, but the memory of its invasion, together with the frightening awareness of what we had become and what we continue to have the potential to become, lingered. We are the ones who have survived. They are the witnesses to the unthinkable. And we are left with a sobering warning that the greatest danger to mankind may not come from the expanse of space, but rather from the stealthy invasion of the body snatchers, the quiet control of the hive. This is a lesson that we are left with. Story 9. I felt a prickling sensation at the back of my neck with a sense of being watched, of being observed. This was the beginning of the disquiet that I was experiencing. The only noises that could be heard at night in the calm suburban area where I lived in Fairfax, Virginia, were the chirping of crickets and the distant hum of traffic. The community was characterized by well-kept lawns and garages that could accommodate 2 cars. Now a new sound had joined the nightly symphony, and it was a quiet that was so deep and so alien that it was more unnerving than any noise. My first reaction was to dismiss it as paranoia, which is the result of stress and excessive exposure to late-night news. Despite this, the sensation continued to linger, becoming more powerful and demanding. I began to notice things that were on the periphery of my vision, such as transient shadows that flashed in the corners of my eyes and black forms that darted behind trees and shrubs. I tried to convince myself that it was simply my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that a fundamental fear, a profound dread, was building up inside of me. Afterward, the reports arrived. There were rumors going around among my neighbors about unusual happenings, about sounds that could not be explained throughout the night, and about dark figures that were seen lurking in backyards and peeking through windows. Fear crept around the neighborhood like a contagious disease, and the murmurs eventually transformed into talks that were held in a hushed tone. There was someone watching us. I began my investigation because I felt compelled to have an understanding of the situation in order to alleviate the anxiety that was engulfing our community. I have put security cameras all around my home, with their lenses sweeping the darkness and their sensors keeping an eye out for any indication of an unauthorized entry. My senses were heightened, and my pulse was hammering in my chest, despite the fact that I spent my evenings patrolling the area with my flashlight shining brightly through the darkness. Then I was able to see them, in a manner that was not obvious or distinct, but more as momentary glances, black entities that moved with an unsettling stillness and speed. their forms twisting and distorting in the shadows. They seemed to be tall and slim beings, with their bodies shrouded in darkness and their eyes emitting a faint light that seemed to come from another universe. Their role was that of observers. Neither were they attempting to conceal themselves in any way. They seemed to take pleasure in our anxiety and the worsening of our paranoia. They would emerge on the outside of our field of view, just beyond our grasp, their presence serving as a persistent and disturbing reminder that we were being watched, that we were being studied. Nothing was caught by the security cameras, since their lenses were unable to see through the darkness that surrounded the people who were watching. Our claims were disregarded by the police when they were contacted, stating that they were the result of mass hysteria and the fears of a society that was seized by terror. By ourselves, our worries were disregarded, and our cautions were disregarded. The observers were more brazen and braver, as their appearances increased in frequency and frequency of appearance. As if they were playing a game of cat and mouse with our sanity, they began leaving signs, bizarre symbols chalked on sidewalks, patterns of light burns on homes, and little metallic items put in strategic spots. It seemed as if they were mocking us. The community began to disintegrate under the strain of the presence that was not seen, and the anxiety eventually turned into panic. As the quiet horror that had settled over our community began to take hold, people began to leave, abandoning their houses and having their lives thrown into disarray. A determined resistance to be forced away, a frantic desire to comprehend the purpose of the observers, and their motivation for picking our tranquil suburban town as their observation station were the driving forces behind my decision to remain. And then there was a night when they disclosed their identities. They presented themselves not as shadowy shapes or transient glances, but rather as themselves. After emerging from the shadows, their bodies were now completely apparent, and the alien traits that they had were striking and unnerving. It was not the ugly creatures that we had seen in our dreams. Rather, it was something that was far more unsettling. They were, simply, stunning. Their skin sparkled with an iridescent shine, their eyes glowed with an intellect that seemed to come from another realm, and their motions were beautiful and easily flowing. They did not communicate since it was unnecessary for them to do so. Their presence, their sheer existence was a message, a terrifying witness to the immensity of the cosmos and the insignificance of mankind. Their mere existence was a message. Neither did they kidnap us, nor did they do us any damage. The only thing they did was, they watched every movement we took, every encounter we had, and every feeling we had. Their eyes recorded everything about our life, including our worries, our hopes, and our dreams. Every one of us was a specimen in a cosmic zoo, and our very existence was either a source of entertainment or a potential topic of scientific investigation. The observers lingered for many weeks, their presence serving as a persistent and unnerving reminder of our frailty and our insignificance in comparison to the vastness of the universe. Then, just as abruptly as they had come, they disappeared, leaving behind a town that would never be the same again, eternally tormented by the quiet fear of their stare. We, the specimens, are the ones who are being watched and studied. To add insult to injury, we are left with the unsettling realization that we are not alone, that we are being watched even at this very moment by eyes that see more than we are able to understand. Story. We were imprisoned in a reoccurring nightmare because the Mojave Desert, which was a huge expanse of sand and rock under a blazing heat, harbored a secret, a temporal anomaly, and a time loop that we were unable to escape. It all began with a camping trip, which was a weekend getaway from the city, an opportunity to get back in touch with nature, and an opportunity to see the awe-inspiring beauty of the desert terrain. Not only were my pals Liam, Maya, and Chloe seasoned campers, but we were also familiar with the ways of the desert and had prepared ourselves for the terrible circumstances that it has. We had not anticipated the things that we discovered. As the sun began to set, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple, we gathered around the campfire, telling tales, laughing, and basking in the reassuring warmth of the flames. After then, we were able to see it. There was a brilliant light that suddenly erupted in the sky. It was traveling with an extraordinary speed and agility, and its path was disorderly and unexpected. The object in question was neither a satellite nor an aircraft. It was of a different kind. An eerie, unearthly glow was created by the light as it fell through the air and hovered over us. The atmosphere was filled with a low hum, and the frequency of the sound reverberated all the way down into our bones. Although our thoughts were straining to understand what we were seeing, we stared in amazement and dread as everything unfolded before us. Suddenly, there was complete darkness. When we awoke the next morning, we were left feeling bewildered and confused, with our recollections of the previous night being fractured and absent. The heat of the desert, the tiredness of the long trip, and the impact of drinking one too many beers around the campfire were all factors that we attributed to the situation. On the other hand, as the day went on, a terrible reality started to come to light. We were reliving the events of the previous day. There were the same talks, the same jokes, and the same series of events that took place just as they had in the past. The sun went down, leaving the sky the same shades of orange and purple as it had been before. With the faint hum that was vibrating through the air, the brilliant light suddenly materialized in the sky and began to descend towards us. After that, there was darkness. Our lives were reduced to a pre-recorded screenplay, and our destinies were predestined by an unknown power. We discovered that we were stuck in a time loop, which was an eternal replay of the same 24-day period. It was then that the first feeling of perplexity gave way to a rising sensation of dread, and panic started to set in. Our life was reduced to a cosmic echo, and we were held captive by the passage of time. We did all in our power to break the cycle and get away from the nightmare that kept coming back. Our activities were altered. We diverged from the plan, and we took new decisions because of this. But nothing was successful. This caused the cycle to reset, and the events of the day continued to unfold just as they had in the past. The alien light came back, and the darkness continued to fall. The cycle continued to repeat itself, and as it did, our memories started to merge with one another, and the lines that separated the past, the present, and the future began to blur, creating a confused and unsettling muddle. In the beginning, we began to get glimpses of other loops, other versions of ourselves, with their acts being slightly different and their outcomes being gently changed. We were not only confined to a single loop, rather, we were confined to a plurality of loops, a maze from which there were an endless number of alternatives. In order to evaluate the boundaries of the loop, we started conducting experiments which allowed us to investigate the various routes and the various results. The turmoil, the insanity, and the utter ridiculousness of our circumstance were all things that we accepted. The whole of our lives became a series of improvisations on a recurrent subject, and we became performers in our very own cosmic drama. Then, and only then, did we uncover the truth. An intentional act, an experiment carried out by an intelligence that cannot be seen. The alien light, which was the origin of the time loop, was not a random occurrence. Rather, it was a planned act. Our lives were influenced, our decisions were monitored, and our responses were studied. We were subjects in a cosmic laboratory studying our reactions. The time loop was not a jail, rather, it was a testing ground through which the extraterrestrials could examine human behavior, with the goal of gaining an understanding of our fears, our aspirations, and our motives. Not only were we unable to escape time, but we were also unable to escape their gaze, which analyzed every action we took and dissected every idea we produced. The people who were watching us, the invisible observers, were gaining information from us, and their understanding was expanding with each iteration of the loop. Our identities were gradually disappearing into the echoes of the desert, and we, the unknowing victims of their experiment, were slowly losing our brains. To restore our agency and our humanity, we continued to battle, to fight against the cycle, and to reclaim our humanity. It was clear to us that the observers were monitoring us and gaining knowledge from us. Also, we made the decision to provide them with something to learn. We took use of the loop to investigate the many possibilities, to test the boundaries of our resiliency, our inventiveness, and our capacity for love and compassion, and to explore the various possibilities via the loop. We transformed the time loop into a canvas and created a piece of art out of our lives, which is a demonstration of the eternal spirit of mankind. Then, just as abruptly as it had started, the loop was eventually broken. The light from the aliens disappeared, the buzz stopped, and the desert went back to its normal natural pace. We had been liberated, emancipated from the confines of the temporal jail, with our memories unaltered and our experiences permanently imprinted in our brains. After surviving the time loop and the echoes in the desert, we were finally free. In addition, we had acquired a significant and important knowledge for ourselves. It is possible for the human spirit to persevere, to adapt, and to create, even when confronted with the unknowable and when it is held in the grasp of the unexpected. We are the ones who have survived the time loop, and the echoes of the desert are something that we keep inside us. They serve as a reminder of our resiliency, our strength, and our humanity that endures.